David likes to take advantage of my foot and mouth syndrome.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Plain Truth, a Holy Spirited podcast. I am Maggie Ulmer, and I am here with
Scott Kisker,
David Watson,
and we're all here with you two.
Yeah.
and we got a humdinger today.
Yes, we do.
Woo-hoo.
But before that, I would like to mount protest. I would like to speak with the manager. I'm going to put on my angry lady hat and just say, what the heck was with the opening?
Karen.
We don't know. Nice people are named Karen.
I know. One of my best friends is named Karen.
What is with the opening last week, David Watson?
What was with?
It was me, humming.
Yeah, that's right. I remember now.
Well, it was funny.
I just want to say that I didn't know that was the opening, and I was standing in my kitchen, and all of a sudden I heard this humming, and I was like, whoa, that's trippy. It sounds like me. And it was my husband playing the podcast, and I was like, oh, that is me. Nice, okay.
Well, did he think it was funny?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
In fact, that's why he was playing it out loud.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't like that. I don't like being the butt of our jokes.
I don't think you were the butt of a joke, per se.
No, just an ongoing campaign for David to reveal my ridiculousness. Actually, it's not really that hidden, but all right, let's move on.
Well, we're gonna have a very substantive conversation today about Christian nationalism.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
And it's going to be super good, this conversation.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Okay.
So
this word gets thrown around a lot
Let's
these
define
days.
Let's define some terms.
So Christian, those are people who have...
Scott and I, by the way, had a really long conversation last night about Binaca.
You mean like the thing that you spray in your
Spray in your
mouth?
mouth? Yeah.
Yeah,
Because when
Binaca.
we were in, elementary school, heck, everybody had Binaca.
And my question is,
What
where
happened
did
to
it go?
Binaca?
Anyway, that's not a good podcast topic, but
Whoa.
it was interesting, and it
you
did require
found
some
the ability
internet.
to buy it at
You
Walgreens.
can buy Binaca, but let's talk about Christian nationalism.
All right.
So I was doing a little research on this. I found a website, Jamar Tisby's Substack, and on this he talks about a book by Samuel Perry, two sociologists, Samuel Perry and Andrew Whitehead, called Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States. And in this, they describe Christian nationalism as an ideology that idealizes and advocates a fusion of Christianity with American civic belonging and participation.
And American exceptionalism.
Well, that's not in their
I know it's not in
definition.
there,
Yeah.
but I
But
would
it,
just say
it does
that's
seem
part
to
of it.
be part of it, yeah.
Well, yes. So I think we can start there, but it is a contested definition, and so maybe we can talk about some of the other aspects of that. Right? We have an article that will come out.
Firebrand.
It should be out by the time this podcast drops, by Mark Tooley. That I think is a very nice piece on Christian nationalism. Thank you, Mark Tooley. And I think on the one hand, sometimes people use the term Christian nationalism as a way of talking about kind of this should be essentially a Christian state, okay? Or at the most benign way of talking about it would be the values of Christianity should essentially be the values of the nation should be Christian values. The rules of the nation should be Christian rules, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are far less generous interpretations of the term that equate it with white ethnocentrism and other forms of racism. So I'll stop there.
Okay, well, so we've got, And there is also just the attempt by folks who fear Christian influence in society at large, general secularists, etc.
That's the lady.
Maggie is showing me a picture of
And making a whole lot of noise.
Sorry.
Lauren Boebert.
Yeah, she's the representative from Colorado, I think. And she
She wants a biblical citizenship test.
and training in public schools.
Well, I mean, for a long time, let's be honest, for a long time, you did have some sort of Christian training in public schools until the 1960s. That was a major change. Everybody said the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer at the beginning of school.
The Lord's Prayer, really?
Yep. You were expected to know, the golden rule, and you knew where it came from.
Well, here's the thing. This is what I don't actually agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying the Pledge of Allegiance. But
I'm just saying there has been a shift in the national consciousness about the relationship of Christianity to what is implicitly the meaning of America.
Sure.
And that is relatively new, right? Something that was relatively uncontested for, 150 years.
Yeah, well, whatever. We're not here to talk about that particular thing, but
Well, it is. I think it's relevant because those who want, many people who are being labeled as Christian nationalists are those who think that the experiment to remove religion from the public life of the United States was a bad life choice.
well, I do think that's true. But saying religion is not the same thing as saying Christianity.
Well, yeah. But and they would definitely argue that the meaning of America has something to do with the Christian ethos that shaped ideas of democracy in this country.
So, Ken Collins produced a review of Tom Holland's book, Dominion, a while back. And Dominion, a lot of what it deals with is the way in which the kind of values of individual freedom that we have in the United States and other such values are derived from Christianity. You couldn't have them without Christianity, even though Holland himself is not a Christian. And he, I think there's a difference between saying that and the phrase that America is a Christian nation, which used to get said a lot. It doesn't really get said so much anymore. But
certainly in the 19th century, especially the late 19th century, when it was becoming increasingly obvious that it wasn't, that was said more often. You say it more often when it's not true. But yes.
And so I actually don't think that – I do believe that Christian, Judeo-Christian values were certainly – you could not have America – in the system of governance that we have without those. But to say that America is a Christian nation, I think it's to misconstrue its founding.
Yeah.
In the sense that if you take something like the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, these are not Christian documents. They are Enlightenment documents. But it was Christianity. The Enlightenment is riffing off of ideas that came out of Christianity.
Right. You couldn't have the West period, sort of Western civilization, without Christianity having had a long period of influence in those various cultures.
Right. And so I think the idea that, and then, despite the fact, as we all know, despite the fact that, at points in our history, people said the Lord's Prayer before school, saying the Lord's Prayer before school, and then the sort of cultural sins of the United States. These things existed simultaneously with one another.
Yeah.
And so we had things like slavery, or
segregation, Jim Crow laws,
right, we've had millions of abortions in this country. We've had, parts of the country are now more and more tolerating killing our old people, euthanizing them, essentially. Call it medical aid in dying if you want to, but we're euthanizing old and sick people. And so, the idea that somehow we have been this embodiment of Christianity at any point in our history is simply false.
But I don't think anybody, when you say the word Christian nation, historically what you mean is like the European Christian nations where the church had a privileged role with, or some version of the church had a privileged role in the running of the state. And whether that meant that bishops had a seat in the House of Lords, or it meant that the monarch was considered a defender of the faith, or whatever, it just meant that Christianity has some privileged position. Now, that also didn't mean that nations with whom Christianity had some privileged position didn't
do corrupt
do
things.
horrible things like colonize other countries and enslave populations and
there
all of that.
And there was conflict between Christianity and sort of heads of nations very early on.
Of course.
Yeah, they were like, please stop telling me what to do.
There's a reason why the state at the time of the Reformation often took advantage in order to bring the church under the state.
I mean, that has been one of the primary conflicts in church history since very early. I mean, that's why there were 2 papacies at one point. That's why,
3 at one point.
Yes, it's like because the heads of state were like, I'm actually not under the church. Quit telling me what to do. Quit trying to pick my kings.
Well, so I think on the issue of Christian nationalism, part of the problem in the discussion is that we don't share a common definition of the term, and so it gets lobbed around like a hand grenade, and we can never arrive at any kind of consensus position because we do not share common presuppositions.
And not only that, I don't think I find myself, I'll speak for myself, I find myself uncomfortable and at odds with how some people who are embracing a definition of Christian nationalism, how they are also, in concert with this definition, defining how to live the Christian life. Like, I don't find these things to be congruent.
Well, there's a huge danger in assuming. So, a typical way we understand what a nationalist means is that you sort of strongly identify with your nation and you want to support the interests of your nation above and beyond the interests of other nations, right? Now,
and sometimes at the sacrifice of other nations.
Well, I mean, pretty much always. That is like the whole point of the government, right? I mean, you don't expect Biden to, say, well, I'm going to make policy that will actually help,
Yeah, but there are
China,
degrees,
right?
There are degrees to this, the expressions of this, right? Because you have leaders doing their due diligence, their fiduciary responsibilities of like protecting the interests of the country that they lead, and then there's Marxism, or there's the expression of it found in World War II through Hitler, where you're like, I want to dominate.
It's
other
almost
countries.
the same thing, but yes, no, I mean, colonialism is also. I mean, the problem. What I was going to say is the problem with throwing those two things together, Christian nationalism, is that of course Jesus loves all nations.
Right.
So if you're going to follow Jesus, you can't actually follow in any kind of consistent way a nationalist program.
Or just, yes.
Right? I mean, if you genuinely love your neighbor as yourself,
You're not
that
dominating
means
them. Yeah.
you love China as you love the United States,
Well,
and that's
so
and let alone love your enemies.
we've all been other places, and I've traveled enough in different parts of the world really to appreciate what we have here in the United States on a variety of levels, and not just the freedom that we have, which is considerable compared to a lot of places in the world, but also the opportunity that we have as well, including economic opportunity.
And I want to say the freedom that we have is in many ways a product of Christianity's insistence that faith must be freely assented to.
Well, let me finish this thought real quick. So I am in that sense, I am patriotic. I value America. I like America. I understand that America does and has done bad things. I get that. But I've also seen what a lot of the alternatives look like.
Yeah.
And so I'm appreciative of what we have here, even as I recognize that we also have our problems. And then at the same time, you can be appreciative of America and even patriotic without, while also wishing the good of other nations.
That's correct.
Right? And so, when I go to places that don't have the kinds of things that we have in America, they don't have the freedom we have, or they don't have the economic opportunities that we have, or things like that. What I want for those countries is well-being. I do want them to have those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so I think that you can be my point is, I think you can be patriotic and appreciative while remaining critical in some ways of America, and also wishing good for other countries.
Yeah, flourishing
as
for
well.
other people. Yes, fully agree with that.
Now, maybe that's an idealistic viewpoint, because at some time the rubber is going to meet the road, and in some circumstances you're going to have to make a decision about your country versus another country, or something like that.
But I think that those questions aren't necessarily then questions of like Christian nationalism. That's, well, I don't know. I mean, it's like, well, then we just get into areas of just war, and those are different topics.
Well, but I mean, that was the whole, the whole peace movement prior to World War I was largely, if not almost exclusively, a Christian movement that, look, these people are fighting.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to
engage in that.
We're not supposed to engage in that, right?
Yeah.
So the isolationist movements in the United States have often been, and certainly pacifist movements have almost always been rooted in some form of Christianity.
It's fascinating. Our sponsor for today is United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. United is a seminary that believes in the power of the Holy Spirit to work through ordinary people, faithfully following God's call on their lives. Master's and doctoral degrees equip leaders to carry the historic Christian faith into the world. If God is calling you to ministry, consider United as a place where you can become a bold, Spirit-filled leader who makes disciples of Jesus Christ. Learn more at united.edu.
On Tisby's page, he talks about a kind of Christian nationalism. He really kind of zeroes in on one definition of Christian nationalism. And so let me kind of read what he writes here. He says, "How does Christian nationalism show up in politics and policy? According to multiple academic studies using large nationally representative surveys, Americans who embrace Christian nationalism are likely to," and he has a list here, "approve of authoritarian tactics like demanding people show respect for national symbols and traditions, fear and distrust religious minorities, including Muslims, atheists, and Jewish people, condone police violence toward Black Americans and distrust accounts of racial inequality in the criminal justice system, believe racial inequality is due to the personal shortcomings of minority groups, report being very uncomfortable with both interracial marriage and transracial adoption, hold anti-immigrant views, fear refugees, oppose scientists and science education in schools, believe that men are better suited for all leadership roles while women are better suited to care for children and the home.
That is just a list of...
That's a list of problems right there.
Wait, this is, I don't even, I'm not sure.
Scott is questioning the sources.
As always. Yeah.
Well, what I want to, this information is from the book that I referred to earlier, Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States by Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry. Now, I think what this list embodies is sort of the worst way that we can identify Christian
But
nationalism.
isn't that just the creation of a boogeyman that, so certain, you can throw this label on people who actually hold a whole variety of ideas, but because that's what it means, right? Suddenly they're smeared with all of this stuff, and for people who are, much more averse to any kind of theistic aspects of American, monotheistic, let's even put it, want monotheism out of their America, are going to, basically go into panic, right?
Well, I think, just to back this up a little bit, the first thing I want to say is, yes, there are people whom this list describes accurately.
Sure.
And then there are people whom parts of this list describe, okay? And
yeah.
so, yes, we have that, but I think what
And
you're...
there are people who love their
I-
nation and love Jesus who would fit into
But
almost
what
none
I
of those.
think you're getting at
Yeah.
is that to use the same language to describe this group and to describe other people who don't fit these characteristics is kind of a sleight of hand,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
It's a rhetorical hand grenade that allows you to sort of blow up your opponents by tarring them with the same brush as people who don't want there to be Jews in the United States or
Right,
something
right.
like that, right? And so, yes, this group exists, but then the term Christian nationalism is, as Scott said, used to describe people who don't fit these categories.
Right, and so I think there are a couple different issues here. One issue is that, I certainly see this in a lot of our various circles of communication where people who may hold a more orthodox or evangelical view are just like, wow, that is really unpopular with some people right now. And they feel like they are, just as you're describing, being lumped in with another group who uses similar language, maybe calls themselves conservative or orthodox or whatever. They're, just as you're saying, they're being bludgeoned. So that with the same stick. That's one problem. Wait.
I'm sorry.
And then the other issue, though, is for Christians to have discerning minds about this issue. So there's an outside issue of conflict from people who just generally don't agree with Christianity and anything either substantively and meaningfully associated with it or anything tangentially related to it. The good, bad, and the ugly, right? And then there's the internal issue of Christians who are struggling to find footing, to feel proud of their faith, to understand how they're relating to their environment, feeling like, wow, this is really not a very popular thing to, embody these days, and finding some people, some Christians, are finding solidarity with people who may adopt the label Christian nationalists because they're like, yeah, they're finding solidarity in, forgive me, but victimhood, or in anger or in fear. And those are not the right things. Jesus doesn't call us to find solidarity in those things. And so the issue that I'm always most concerned about, like I'm like, I don't really care what non-Christians do. I can't control them. And this whole issue of dominance is like the Lord says, don't dominate people. That's the bottom line. We don't do that. except we can talk about wars or whatever, but I'm talking about individuals here. But what Christians do is of concern to me.
Me too.
And so when this mindset that you've described of this list, which may or may not all exist in one individual person or whatever, when that starts to infiltrate Christianity, I have problems with that. And that's, I feel like, that's the conversation that I'm like, can we talk about this? Like, can we, hey, other Christians, why are you afraid of immigrants coming? Like, what's that about? Like, you know.
So two things I want to say. I do think that this gets used as a
it's a weapon,
a bugbear.
Yeah.
And that there are lots of people who are, who may genuinely fit some of these, but and would say, yeah, I'm a Christian but.
No, you're not.
But they don't go to church. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
sure. They've adopted something that they think is American. They think Christianity is American, and
whatever, or they've heard of Jesus and they like him, or they've got a picture of Jesus in their house somewhere, but they've never, they don't go to
the blonde-haired, blue-eyed one where he's gazing off into the distance.
Solomon's head of Christ.
Yes, always.
But also, I think there is a kind of, to be the most generous, a sort of ignorance about Christianity on the part of the some folks in the media. I just remember this story where there was some like Norse pagan group that took over a building that used to be a church somewhere in Minnesota, and they, of course,
Thor worshippers.
Yeah, they're Thor worshippers. Yeah, my favorite group, not. But in any case, like the media kept calling them a church, and I'm like, they're pagans. They're not Christians, right? By definition, and they were the article I remember in the video, media thing that I saw was like all about how these people are racist. And I'm like, well, yeah, because they have a tribal deity that they worship and, but I do think it would be, there's sort of a lack of making distinctions. And I do think it would be interesting to throw out, like, what are the options for Christian engagement with the nation that, because it's not like there's one option.
No, but
throughout Christianity.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
And not all of them are, not all of them are evil. And some have a tighter relationship with the nation than others. And that seems like a much more interesting conversation to say, okay, yeah, I'm a Christian and I am a citizen of the United States of America. How do I
navigate that?
That, I've got my foot in two worlds, as Luther would say.
I agree with that. I think, though, and who knows, David, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because when you have people like representatives of our country or of states standing up and saying, we need to reinstitute constitutional this or reinstitute like a Constitution Alive is the program she specifically referenced, which is developed by the representative from Colorado, Lauren Boebert. She was saying maybe we should have Constitution Alive training and biblical literacy citizenship tests put back in schools. Maybe that's how we turn the country around.
What is Constitution
Alive? So this Constitution Alive is a patriot or like a citizenship literacy program run by Kirk Cameron from the
hit TV show
Growing Pains?
I don't remember.
But it's part of the Patriot Academy. Now, I'm not making a judgment about that. I know nothing about it.
I don't know anything about it.
I think there are probably assumptions we could all sort of infer, but whatever.
But let's not infer.
Let's not infer. Let's be rational and fair. Also, but biblical literacy training, I don't know what the point of that would be other than
Well, here's what I think. And I'm getting this from Carl Trueman now. I just wrote
Book
I spent
review.
all day yesterday writing a review
Well done.
of The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And I think this is the issue that folks like that are trying to address.
Yeah.
I mean, the media is necessarily going to cast them as having bad intentions.
Right.
I don't know what her intentions are.
Right.
But I think the issue that a lot of people are trying to address is that, okay, he uses a sociologist named Philip Reef, okay?
He's not a Christian.
And Reef talks about first world, second world, and third worlds. Okay, now first worlds, he says, are like pagan cultures. Second worlds is like the medieval world of Christian culture, or even a culture where, like the United States of 100 years ago, where there are a whole lot of Christians. But then the third world, he says, is a world without a desacralized world.
Right.
Right? There is no sacred order underlying our common decisions to which we can appeal. And so morality, ethics simply become matters of aesthetics or personal taste. So something is right because it feels right to me. I find it psychologically fulfilling. It brings me happiness. And something is wrong for because it feels wrong to me and I don't like it, and it hurts my well-being or the well-being of the psychological well-being of another person. Okay, and so or it's what Alistair McIntyre calls emotivism. Not Alistair McIntyre, calls emotivism. And so, in the absence of a sort of in a desacralized world, where decisions are made emotively. And I think it's hard to argue that the United States or the Western world now has not become that. What happens is that moral debates descend into chaos and contests of power. And so if someone wants to re-sacralize our common life, I understand that. Now, I don't think that you can do it through the force of law. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that you can re-sacralize culture with such a heavy hand. I think to re-sacralize the United States, what's going to be necessary is revival.
Well, oh no,
You're going to have a move of God. And then, what would happen in that case is that you would have more people sharing at least a common set of assumptions. But to sort of take values and take a worldview that a huge chunk of America does not ascribe to, and then impose that religious worldview on everyone in such a heavy-handed way seems to me that sounds like it's going to be an unsuccessful venture.
yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with what you're saying, and part of me is like, in a democracy, that always happens. That, in some sense, a morality is reflected in the laws of the larger community.
Yes.
And that morality is religious, even if that religion is some sort of secular, philosophy. So the laws governing secular France have a moral character that is derived from somewhere, which one could argue is religious, even though it is not Catholic, which is what they
were
theory,
originally.
in theory,
Yeah.
right? I mean, really, I'm not sure, Louis the whatever was ever a real very good Catholic, but nonetheless.
I mean, if what we mean by religion is kind of like motivated by ultimate concern, then yeah. If what we mean by religion is that there is an appeal to some type of metaphysical order, then no. And that's where the breakdown happens. Is that
But there must be some sort of order because there's a law.
And the law is simply, perhaps the law is simply based on the personal tastes of the majority of the voting public.
Well, Exactly.
But those
that
personal
means
tastes may not be derived from anything metaphysical.
that's where I would disagree.
Well, but I think that the distinctions that you guys are making are the difference between what is sort of like ontologically true versus what people walk around saying about themselves.
But what I mean is if say in the early 19th century we have this massive revival and a whole lot of people come to violently oppose slavery, which had just kind of been accepted for literally millennia, 5,000 years as part of civilization. It was just a normal thing. And they, well, in England, they managed to vote it out. Mm-hmm. And in this country, we managed to vote it out in certain places and then fight a war about it. That is it's both a metaphysical. The law is imposing limits on people's behavior that has some moral decision behind it. And where that moral decision comes from, if we decide that the moral decision is that we decide that morality determines that a woman can have abortion up into the point of birth. That's a law, and it's based on some sort of understanding of the value of a woman's life and the abstract notion of rights and who gives those rights and all of these are in some sense religious first principles.
Mm-hmm. I just think you're giving too much credit to the way a lot of people make moral decisions.
I think that's true. I mean,
I do think this McIntyre's notion of emotivism is really the order of the day right now.
I'll just say it again. I think you're describing two things that are true. Like what you're saying is ontologically true, and we know this because Christians believe this. This is just the theology of creation. But I think what I hear David articulating, and I'm not ascribing this meaning to it, but this is what I'm hearing, is that people do not walk around with this larger understanding.
Well, it's simply to say people don't know they're pagans.
Yeah.
But their willingness, to chase after whatever thing is going to give them whatever benefit they think they need at any given moment is essentially a pagan kind of philosophy.
Well, here's what I would say actually earlier, and when you were talking about re-sacralizing the culture, one of the things I see happening, and there's this book called Strange Rites that I've been slowly sort of dragging myself through. It's actually a very quick, easy, interesting read. But one of the things that I do think is different right now is that spirituality is really very in our culture right now. I would say that we're far less secular and far more pagan, intentionally pagan. And that not only, as you're saying, Scott, do people sort of, people are engaging their religious, their political pursuits, their sort of regular entertainment diversions with religious fervor, and will do so explicitly. They will name it as a religious, spiritual thing. So anyway, all that to say, one of the ways I think we begin by re-sacralizing the culture is when this sort of like broad spirituality, good, bad, and ugly, comes back into the forefront of consciousness. It's sort of like the wheat and the tares grow up together. It's like if I can just sort of speak from my prophetic hat on, it's like trying to teach people what a move of God looks like when they're coming out of a place where they were coming from a place where there was nothing acknowledged, where everything is secular. We separate the church and the state, where the church itself was largely, had no power, manifest power of God within it. That's very hard. But if you let the whole ocean flood in, then you're like, crap, everything's wet. And then you start to discern what's good, what's bad. And I think if you see in Scripture, that's how pagan culture became Christianized. Somebody came in and said, hey, I see, yes, you acknowledge that there are spirits, but let me tell you about this unknown God that you're referencing and how this God is actually the God. And these other things, this is not going to work out so well for you. So I think we have to start from this place. There has to just be an acknowledgement of otherworldliness first. Anyway.
Well, and I also think we have to acknowledge that those who are, using the term Christian nationalist as a cudgel to kind of shut up people, and those who are saying we need a morality to be taught in our general public schools, and we need a morality to guide this nation, or we're going to end up in chaos.
Right.
Both of those groups actually have a vision for America that has some point of truth in the country's founding, and
Absolutely.
both want what they believe is for the good and the salvation of, this country.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Long term.
Absolutely.
So
they just have different visions of what that looks like.
exactly, and the great difficulty is that both can't have their way. That's not going to, right? We can't have individualized laws for, this is what I was getting at with different kind of Christian understandings of the relationship. You can have like the Benedict option where Christians just basically live their own laws and let whatever the laws of the state are, who cares, we'll build our fortress mentality and we won't interact. We won't send our kids to public school. We won't, we'll basically become like the Amish or Anabaptists throughout this country.
But they won't contradict the law of the land either.
Right. Well, it depends what the law of the land
Yeah,
is.
it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. I'm speaking
Like
specifically.
if the law of the land is you are going to be conscripted and fight in our military to defend our nation, then Amish brethren are going to say, actually, no, we won't. We will
You're
move.
correct, yes.
We will move to another country before we will do that.
Well,
And I've often said that to myself, in at least in my head, if not out loud, that I up to a certain point, I am loyal to the United States, but beyond a certain point, I will be as loyal to my nation of birth as my ancestors were to theirs. Which is why we're here and not in Saxony, okay?
Yeah, Christians have one Lord,
yeah,
but we do live within
a
a
framework.
system of government.
Yeah.
Right. And I think by and large, we need to honor our system of government, but there are times when the lordship of Jesus comes against other claims of lordship.
Absolutely.
And in that case, Jesus wins.
Absolutely.
Right? We pick
being Lord of
Jesus.
heaven and earth,
We pick Jesus.
having
right?
all authority, right?
I'm simply I'm thinking just more broadly in terms of like, you're not going like, what is this, like the sovereign citizen movement? Have you ever heard of this?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Like, listen, you must follow traffic laws.
I love this. No, I'm a sovereign citizen. I can
know
drive
about this?
85 down Main Street in
gosh,
Clayton,
I'm a
Ohio.
sovereign citizen.
Yeah, because I'm sovereign citizen.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
You should spend some time on YouTube. Look it up.
It is amazing.
So,
But I agree with
that's just to
both
say
of
that
what you're
there
saying.
are crazy Americans, which we already knew.
The
Yes.
last thing, and I know we don't have much time left, but the last thing I do just want to clarify is that while I am committed to living my life as a Christian, and I could foresee instances where my Christian faith becomes incompatible with the rule of law. I mean, I could envision those things at least. I also am wary of these movements, these theocratic movements that are gaining traction both in Catholic and Reformed circles.
Amen.
And in the Catholic world, it's called integralism. And I'm not Catholic. I don't want to be Catholic. I like Catholics. I respect Catholicism.
You like Bishop
Some
Barron.
of my friends are Catholic.
I love
I
Bishop
have
Barron,
Catholic friends.
but I do not want to be Catholic or have to live like a Catholic. And by the same token, I don't want to, by force of law, make Jews live like Christians, for
Yeah.
example. I mean, we do live in a society where there is no state church.
Right.
Now, we can't forbid the establishment of religion, and at the same time,
We can forbid the establishment of religion. What do you mean?
I mean,
We do.
no,
As a
religion
state-
as a state,
state
church.
church.
We do forbid it as a
Yeah.
state church. Yeah, but,
But
we
not
also
just generally.
It is
Like
our,
you
our
can
right
start the Church of
to-
Scott if you want.
Right.
Yeah,
I see
right.
what you're saying.
Yeah, the Church of Scott. And
I mean, I don't think that'd be good for your soul.
it'd be a very
but-
well
Or
ordered.
anyone
Well-ordered
else's.
church.
Yeah,
Anyone else's.
It would
Yeah.
be a form of pietism. So I just want to, I mean, I have said this before, but I don't think a theocratic state is the answer here.
Yeah.
I think the answer is for the church to do its job.
to be the church.
And don't make the state do the job of the church.
And I also think that some of these ideas that ideas that are coming somewhat out of Kuyperism and reformed kind of government understandings, but like the whole Seven Mountains thing that
Yeah.
gets play in some
Circles.
Pentecostal charismatic circles.
Yeah.
It is a dangerous thing to grasp for earthly power.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
whole
it
that is exactly not what Jesus did in the desert. So
Yeah.
if we are doing that, we're probably not following him.
And at the same time, I do also want to say that there is a manner in which Christ gives people favor.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that the thing is like the Lord, he constructs the moments of demonstration of his power and authority. Like I think of the prophets who cut themselves and
The prophets of Baal.
yes, and I'm going to say the wrong one.
Elijah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah.
Mount Carmel.
It's like, you have to listen to the Lord. Let him help you choose the moments. You don't need to go out and be like, we're dominating entertainment, government, this. Like, just let the Lord lead you. It's better for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And Christians are called to be salt and light
That's right.
wherever they are. And even those European nations that claimed they were Christian nations, if you scratch the surface, they weren't. And the reality is, even those nations at the height of their secularism, like France, had tarot card worshippers throughout the tarot card readers throughout the town square while they're professing to be completely secular.
Just don't do it, y'all. Don't do that.
No, I'm just saying that some sort of spirituality seems to fill the void. And there is an authority that we take in the spiritual world, but it is not, and of course in a democracy we vote, so we have to vote our consciences.
Yeah. And I don't
That's
have
why
any
David's
problem.
voting for Kanye.
I don't have any problem with. I think Christians should participate in the political life
Yeah.
of the nation.
Yeah.
I do think that. I don't
And
think
some
that
Christians, though, don't think that.
with
because they have different-
withdrawing entirely is a good idea.
No, I agree with you. But, yeah.
So I don't think we've really reached any conclusions here.
Well, we've talked a lot about Christian nationalism, whatever. I don't think we know what it is yet. I mean, because it's like Methodist or Quaker. It's actually
A label somebody else
a label
invented.
somebody else is
Yeah.
throwing at people in order to win an argument without actually having to address the any ideas that are within a particular argument, right?
Yeah.
It's just you don't have to think about this because it's this.
Yeah, and terms like that are rarely useful because we can never have a conversation where everybody knows what we mean.
Right.
So
And then we don't talk about what we mean. But we're trying to talk about what we mean here.
Well, insofar
it's been really clear.
Insofar as the term Christian nationalism refers to a kind of ethnocentrism,
Yeah.
then I think that we want to authoritarian tactics. I think we all reject those.
Not what Jesus did.
Or anti-immigrant views.
Definitely not.
Not scriptural.
Like, yes, we reject those things. If to be a Christian nationalist means that and this is not what it normally is used to mean, but it means that I am a patriotic American who is also a Christian. I don't
and I will vote my conscience in a democratic society,
Right.
and that conscience is shaped by the salvation I know in Jesus Christ, who's a particular individual who lived a particular kind of life.
But that's not the way the word is normally used. So, the common definition, the common way it's used is it's really just become a pejorative term at this point to refer to kind of the extremist positions that I was talking about earlier. And I don't think any of us want to I know that we would not advocate for any of those positions.
Right. That's correct.
And
Racism, ethnocentrism, clearly not Jesus-y.
Misogyny.
Right.
Right.
Not in favor.
And
Shocker.
I think it's a good thing for Christians who are opposed to these kinds of things to speak their opposition in the public sphere and vote their consciences against them. And you're not being a bad Christian in any way when you do that, despite what people may tell you.
Right.
Also, you don't have to tell people.
Well, but
I know. I just mean you don't have to go on social media and
you don't have to
say
go on
your
social
stuff.
media, but-
Just do it. Just do it and be good to the people in your sphere.
But I do think it is, it behooves Christians not to allow the word Christian to be appropriated by people who are actually espousing non-Christian things.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, and
That's why we have
publicly.
Firebrand and ministries like Spirit and Truth and why there are seminaries and why there are, United stuff.
Yeah.
Why there are teachers.
We're doing our best. We're doing our best here.
Or
Doing
we're
our
at least
best.
doing.
Pastors, good pastors, the churches. We can do it.
I have some friends who are really, really into things like politics and political theology, and every time I speak on these matters, I think they must just face palm. But
What about the regular times you talk? Oh!
face palm, always on Binaca again.
For a second, I was we used to get Binaca taken away from us in high school because doesn't it have alcohol in it?
Oh, probably.
But
I mean,
you'd have to have so much Binaca.
I'm not sure. I mean, but
would have the
so does
freshest
Scope.
breath.
I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, also, I do
don't
have
think-
a vague memory of somebody, trying to light it on fire in the hall, the band hallway. in
You
high
could
school.
do that, but it was only a little.
yeah, it
right?
didn't. That wouldn't work. I mean,
You
Somebody-
could get a little burst of flame.
I
if
think
you-
it was just annoying to the teachers. At least you were in high school and there was still Binaca because I don't remember being
You seem
that
to think
old.
Binaca had a very short
I
lifespan.
do. I don't
and
remember. I don't remember having Binaca outside of college.
All I
Past
know-
1989, I have no recollection
High
of
school
Binaca
students
being
are
a
very
thing.
concerned with fresh breath because there's all the, illicit making out.
Yes, in the corner in front of your locker. Okay.
Not in front of my locker. My locker was in the middle of everywhere. All right. That's been our podcast. So, takeaway, Binaca still exists.
It does. I'm going to go over to Walgreens and get some today.
Right now, get
Next
you some.
time I go into a meeting, like a fundraising meeting, I'm going to walk in and shh, right there.
And then
And
you have to
everyone in that meeting will be grateful.
They will.
you have to spit on your pinky and your thumb and smooth your eyebrows.
What? I literally have never heard of or seen
Gotta be like-
anyone do.
No, okay. Anyway.
I don't put that in the same category as
No.
Binaca. Binaca is much classier than that.
Oh yeah, Binaca is not classy. No, that's
Well, agree to disagree.
sure, just like every other day. All right, that's been our podcast today. Yikes. All right, check us out on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Holy Spirit Pod. Rate and like the podcast. And of course, the highest compliment you can pay to us is when you share this podcast with your family and friends. And of course, we want to say thanks to United for the use of the studio. And also, go check out Spirit and Truth. Our website is spiritandtruth.life, which this podcast is a part of. And go and check out all of the other cool things that we do to support and resource church leaders and the church. We love you guys. We'll come back to you next time. Bye.
Bye.